to receive Dana Berro. This is, we have an intervention and panel talk in the framework of ALBA Educational Hub with Redesign. This is a conversation about Lebanon's survival and the 5 different teams that we have studied with our students and our faculties for the last period. So today we are talking about design and ethics, and I'm going to present you Dana, and then we'll pass to the round table. Dana Berro. Dana describes herself as a designer. Dana Berro. Dana describes herself as a designer shaped by many homes across the globe. Her work is guided by curiosity and never-ending questions, drawing from multidisciplinary perspectives and expressed through critical research, curation, product and graphic design. She is currently pursuing a master's in eco-social design at HSLU in Switzerland, continuing to design for knowledge and change. In a world unraveling, an ethical revolution asks what kind of ethics can emerge from collapse, drawing from radical theory, everyday survival in Lebanon, and the ingenuity of its people. It repositions design as a tool for collective liberation and not control. Dana Berro, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you again to Janine and Michelle, who have been incredible throughout the process. It's been months. And thank you all for being here on a Sunday morning. I know that's not easy, so I appreciate it. So I just want to expand a little bit on the note of positioning. As Janine said, I am a designer shaped by many homes. I was born in the US. I resided in several Middle Eastern countries, and finally moving from Lebanon to Italy to Switzerland. And each move has meant relearning, reorienting, readapting, not just to the languages and the cultures, but also to infrastructures, systems, social systems, and unspoken rules. Today, I'm pursuing my master's degree in eco-social design at HSLU in Switzerland, where I'm learning the thoughtfulness and the depth of Swiss design. And before that, Milan taught me the rigor and the poetry of Italian design. Between these worlds, I have come to understand design not only as a practice of making, but also as a practice of reading. Reading contradictions, fragility, hidden infrastructures, and meaning. And so, it is from this shifting ground that I speak tonight about ethics, not as an afterthought, but as the foundation and the infrastructure itself. And because this infrastructure is collapsing, visibly in Lebanon, but also around the world, I call for an ethical revolution. Why revolt? Because ethics is not a layer, but the foundation. And when the foundation erodes, everything else follows. Another fundamental topic that I would like to address to fellow designers, to aspiring designers, and to established designers alike is this. Take a look around at those who are not formally trained in the field, those who are not formally called designers. How do they tackle survival? How do they design their lives and their futures? After all, this is how design is born, out of need. Look, for example, at social networks created on WhatsApp between neighbors in a building or a street that warn each other about water or electricity cuts, or share the local news. How and why are these informal systems designed? What can we learn from them about the needs of our people? me switch. My questions on ethics and design first arose. My questions on ethics and design first arose during my final year at NABA in Milan when I started my thesis. So I used this opportunity to explore the intersection of ethics, technology, and design. My professor, Nico Coronis, hello if you're listening, was an influential figure in my career. And he said one day, very casually in class, "Nobody wants to see another chair." It's seemingly a simple phrase, and I knew that he didn't mean it literally, but I dug as deep as I could into this meaning. Because for years studying the history of design at NABA taught me that creating an iconic chair is almost synonymous to being a successful designer. So, if I'm not to design a chair, what then is my role as a designer? Questioning the norm became my guiding principle. And after some reflection, I reached an also seemingly simple conclusion. We will always need chairs as long as we are human. But perhaps it is our perception on chairs and of design that needs to be questioned. This led me to the modernist poet Ezra Pound's phrase, "Make it new." This was a call for action and innovation, intended for literature and art, but can be equally applied to design. There are many interpretations to this phrase, but the most profound to me is that it is our perception that must be made new, contrary to the idea that make it new simply means creating new things. This phrase now resonates differently. During the Industrial Revolution, perhaps it did mean speed, efficiency, and production, but today, when the surplus of things has become one of our greatest problems, perhaps making it new means transforming how we see. The study of perception led me to the study of the senses, the root of perception itself. And when I found that design for the senses had diminished with the rise of technology, I turned to studying how technological advancements have shaped design and eventually how ethics enters this discussion. So, let's begin with this timeline. This shows the rate of technological development from prehistoric tools to the Industrial Revolution and finally to our digital era. If we can move forward one more slide, because it's a lot of time. And timelines are meant to be linear, but this one collapses in the middle because to symbolize that for centuries, progress was slow, and then suddenly acceleration, where modern advancements became condensed and almost overlapping. But why is this significant? Because the Industrial Revolution, while a milestone of progress, arguably, also generated deep consequences. And so the question today, as we live through the digital revolution, which also promises and has already delivered great things, do we know where we are going? Are we repeating the same mistakes, and can we avoid them? Let's think specifically of the Lebanese context and the disparity between us and the West. Think of the disparity between you and your neighbor, the disparity between you and your parents, your grandmother. What consequences do we face with the rapidity in development layered onto the instability and the lack of the resources in our country? We have entered a state of ambiguity, and soon I will argue that this ambiguity, rather than being a curse, may be our greatest strength and opportunity. Let's consider some important thinkers who may help us see differently, and ask, what happens if these people speak through Lebanon? I chose 5 scholars, philosophers, writers, anthropologists, educators, none of them designers. Yet, they have been pillars to shaping and understanding design today. They bring perspectives that I believe may be of significance to us. The first is Marshall McLuhan. who is a sociologist and philosopher, that proposed that the medium is an extension of the senses. And sometimes the medium in which we convey our message can matter more than the message itself. Why does this matter to designers? Because our senses are the foundation of perception. They provide the input that shapes our interpretation of the world. Briefly, we have the input that comes from the outside through your senses, the processing within you, and finally the output, which can be behavior, emotion. And so in this sense, you can consider that designers hold a tremendous power. We shape that input. So consider something as simple as opening a door and entering a room. How many of your senses are activated? It's the job of designers to acknowledge these sensory experiences through empathy. This is when designing for the senses can become an act of ethics. When we design sensory experiences that are inclusive, rather than one-dimensional experiences that may exclude many. Let's think of the sense of smell in Beirut for a moment. We have an overwhelming amount of sensory cues, some pleasant, some not. But for now, let's consider the pleasant. Like the smell of the bakeries in the morning, the manouche, or the jasmine blooming from the balconies. They carry deep emotional memory. We can go forward. These are sensory threads that bind community to place. Urban redevelopment and standardized architecture often erase them, but designing with olfactory experience in mind, for instance, the preservation of the local farran, planting aromatic vegetation in the city, in public spaces, they can sustain both accessibility and identity. Smell can offer a non-visual form of orientation, a way to belong. So, make it new here means to design for sensory continuity, not replacing the old with the new, but renewing what is familiar with attention and care. Max Weber, he gave us the theory or the cycle of modernity through rationalization, bureaucratization, and disenchantment. Rationalization is what replaces the emotional and traditional thinking with efficiency and control. Bureaucratization codifies this logic into systems and rules. And finally, disenchantment is the loss of mystery, meaning, and magic in a world ruled by logic. Weber also warned us of the iron cage, originally thought of by Freud on an individual level, but then later on applied to society as a whole. He described it as a society so rationalized that it traps human freedom. So perhaps, to escape this cage, we can make it new. To reimagine design, not as efficiency, but in emancipation. Weber might observe that Lebanon's bureaucracies, though weak, still embody rationalization and control. Yet, their inefficiency has produced a peculiar freedom, improvisation. Where the rules failed, creativity thrived, but also corruption. We inhabit both, a paradox of freedom through failure. Take the informal economies, for example, like the fruit vendor with no license, like the mechanic without receipts. The informal WhatsApp groups I previously mentioned. These are not merely symptoms of collapse. They are symptoms of design. Here, ethics is not legislated but lived by the community through trust and reciprocity. Each exchange becomes a moral act sustained not by institutions but by community. They reveal an ethical infrastructure, fragile, improvisational, but profoundly human. We move on to Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote of the ethics of ambiguity. She insisted that freedom is never solitary. My freedom is connected, independent on yours, on hers, on everybody's. And ethics is And so ethics is responsibility in relation. Ambiguity, far from weakness, becomes the space where creation and ethics coexist. Now, philosopher Nolan Gertz later expanded on Beauvoir's ideas. He defined ethical design as something that promotes freedom, and versus unethical design that provides luxury and comfort. He gives the example of designing more comfortable shelters for the homeless, diversions that soothe guilt but ignore the systematic and root causes. This does raise questions though, like what if we need diversions? What if we want diversions? And how do we measure the success of our designs in promoting freedom? I'll give you an example here. Meet 1,000 lira, the 100,000 lira bill. At first glance, this is a symbol of national pride, the cedar tree, the geometric precision, the technology embedded within this bill. But this particular bill carries a much deeper contradiction. It was designed during the economic collapse, when banks froze accounts, when people lost their entire life savings, when the economy disintegrated. And so, the Meet 1,000 lira is not merely a worthless currency, but a case of unethical design. It reassures precisely when reassurance was a lie. It offered permanence at the moment of collapse. And so, Beauvoir would remind us that freedom here is radically ambiguous. It exists and it does not. It is demanded but denied. So to live ethically in this context is to carry one's freedom alongside the freedom of others. Moving on to Bruno Latour, who tells us that technology is society made durable. Objects are never neutral. They inscribe politics and social relationships. A camera, a traffic light, a chair, these are not merely tools, but condensed forms of politics. They hold the structure of society in material form. Latour would say the generators on the rooftops, the tangled electrical wires, these are society made durable, material evidence of infrastructures, of survival and collapse. For example, talking about the electrical grids that are stretched between built balconies and shared water tanks on rooftops. These are networks of dependency and collective engineering. Every cable that crosses from one building to another is a declaration of interdependence. These chaotic networks are designed on empathy and necessity. The monoblock chair and its iterations. It's found in weddings. I'm going to sit for a minute. It's found in weddings, protests, funerals, cafes. It is designed stripped of authorship. It's democratic, anonymous, and adaptable, and resists hierarchy. It gathers people and becomes a silent witness to joy and grief. Through Latour's lens, we can say that this chair is not neutral. It holds social reality in a molded surface. It's an artifact through which power, class, and everyday life becomes visible. And next is Donna Haraway in her Cyborg Manifesto. She introduces hybridity and dualities and binaries, human and machine. Haraway may see Lebanon as a living cyborg, human and machine intertwined, stitched from generators, sectarian systems, diaspora, and kinship networks. She might say or ask, is this hybridity our survival? In Lebanon's contemporary art scene, Haraway's collapse of binaries, particularly male-female, east-west, traditional and modern, are constantly enacted. Many Lebanese artists and designers move fluidly between these categories, creating hybrid identities that resist these fixed definitions. For example, fashion designers, they mix traditional embroidery with modern fashion. Musicians, they fuse the classical Arabic maqam with more electronic sounds. And drag performers who blur the gender lines on stages that were once reserved for patriarchal norms. These embody Haraway's cyborg vision, a world where identity is assembly and relation. And so, how is this ethical? Because it challenges exclusion and domination, both of which are built on dualities. These practices dissolve borders of tradition, hierarchies that define who holds power and who is marginalized. Refusing these oppositions allows for empathy and solidarity across difference. And finally, Paulo Freire, in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, teaches us that education is also never neutral. It either domesticates or it liberates, and liberation begins with naming oppression, what he calls praxis, reflection and action intertwined. Freire may say that our streets themselves have become classrooms. When people protest, chant, and narrate their losses, they are naming oppression. He might make us question, what are we teaching our people, our youth? And more importantly, how are we teaching them? I had the pleasure of participating the other day in a roundtable discussion with Serge Harfouch, the co-founder of Buzuruna Juzuruna, which is an agroecological initiative in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. I think it beautifully embodies Paulo Freire's ideologies. Beyond preserving our traditional seeds, it functions as a living classroom where knowledge is exchanged horizontally between farmers and educators, not imposed from above. Through collective workshops and shared cultivation, we reflect on food sovereignty, ecological dependency and agency, transforming awareness into action, enacting what Freire again called praxis, reflection and action intertwined. They turn farming into an act of collective liberation, a pedagogy rooted in the soil. So to sum up, Latour, the politics of objects, Weber, the politics of structure, McLuhan, the politics and ethics of the senses, Haraway, the politics of hybridity, Beauvoir, the politics of ambiguity, and Freire, the politics of learning itself. These examples show us that ethical design is not a luxury. It emerges from necessity, from relation and collective intelligence. It's designing survival. The revolution, therefore, begins in this act of seeing and in the questions of perception. So, I began with my own movement in my career from Beirut to Milan to Lucerne, and with the claim that design is as much as about reading as it is about making. If there's one thought I leave you with today, it is this. Ethics is not external to design. It can be inscribed into every object, every infrastructure and gesture. So look for it around you, outside of you. Find it on the streets and in the literature. Read it, question it, analyze it, and revolt. I wish I came here today with solutions instead of this, but I too still have so much to learn. I come to offer a provocation instead of your vision, a new way of seeing, of stripping the illusion and recognizing our responsibility in the entangled freedom of others. So, I hope to have planted many more questions than you came in here with. And that, I believe, is where the ethical revolution begins. Thank you. Any questions, thoughts, concerns? Yes.
Hi, I am a student. I'm in Jean Première, and I'm not a designer, but I had a question. At some point, you said that division is needed and wanted, and yes, it is. It creates cultures and kills the killer. But how can we make it so we find balance between the good and the bad division? What I mean is that design always created beauty, but it can also create war and destruction. For example, we were attacked, our architecture is gone, writings are gone, and everything we could say that Lebanon is art is gone. It can create proprietary want. How can we find a balance so that the division in design becomes a source of art and not a source of property?
Testing. It works. Yeah. Thank you for your question, and I can see the passion in you, which I love. I don't believe I said division. I think my word was divergence. So, because division is quite the opposite of what we need right now. We are a society just full of divisions in every sense, in every layer of our being. So I completely agree with you. Division is not something we need, and it's on the contrary. We should be trying to unify each other. Whereas diversions, where, like the example that I gave with the more comfortable shelters for the homeless, it's diverting the attention from what truly matters, which is why are there homeless people in the first place, to designing something pretty, and maybe it helps in the moment, but we're not tackling the root of the cause. Keep that passion.
Hi Dana, thank you for your lecture. Yesterday we had a conversation, and we were talking about kind of ethical design, and we reached this question of sometimes it's not really on a financial level to sell ethical design, right? So especially in a country like Lebanon, what do you suggest we can do to attract value in ethical design, whether for the creator who is doing the job of the designer, but also to the audience and to the market? What can we do?
Also a very tough question, but thank you. So it's really difficult to tell someone that's about to graduate, that wants his independence and wants to make money, wants to feel all the luxury of the world. It's hard to tell them, like, no, don't do that. But it's a decision that an individual can make, and designing for social causes does not necessarily mean that you're going to be poor and living on the streets. It's a tough field, but if we remember that this idea of the interdependency and the freedom, so when one person goes off and decides to be rich and leaves everybody behind, what does that really what happens there? So I know it's a lot to ask, it's hard to envision, but we need to think as a collective. What do my actions have? What consequences happen from my actions? I don't have a clear answer, but that's all I can say. Thank you.
Good morning, Dana. Thank you for your presentation. I was very, very interested by the use of the word revolution instead of renewal, because revolution implies somehow that there are some gods to kill. And I was wondering which god are you going to kill with your revolution?
The questions keep getting more intense. So, I don't want to kill any gods. Let's say there's infrastructures, there's dominant powers that may be detrimental to the progress of our society. And so it's not necessarily that someone needs to die, but something needs to be buried. I don't know if that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, for your presentation and for the questions you raised. The funny thing is that, or funny, I don't know if it's funny, but it's interesting to see that in this redesign event at Alba, we raised many essential questions, I think, about design and the act and how we design it. Is it because we have the vision now? It's a question because out of Alba, we design is showing design as the caprice of designers, just indulging into luxury and shapes that are useless, quantity, expensive materials, whatever. So, in this incoherence, do you think that we should probably initiate some sort of ethical redesign event next time?
Thank you. I was a bit afraid to, how do you say it, bite the hand that feeds you. Redesign, after all, this is part of redesign, but yes, I agree with you. I think we might need a refresher on what design in Lebanon really means, what is currently happening, what maybe could be better. I think ethics, I hope, will play a much bigger role in next year's redesign. It's hard to criticize redesign Beirut. They've created a magnificent, huge, large-scale event in Beirut, but when you question, when it says open to all, who's really going there? Who can really go there? Who's left out? Why are they left out? What are these designers, who are they designing for? And I also don't want to take away from the credit of the designers who have worked hard probably to be there. Some have created pieces that make you reflect on things. Maybe sometimes that's enough. But I definitely hope ethics plays a much larger role, maybe plays the central role in design. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks a lot, Donna. That was a lot more of an intellectual talk than I was imagining, but it's really useful, as you say, to question things and to challenge norms. Just a little bit more about, if you can expand on what the word ethics means. I know you spoke about it already, but from different perspectives, cultural, individual, psychological, one person's act would be ethical and to the other person it would be the opposite act. If you could just expand a little bit more on how different people and groups could see the word ethics.
That's also a very good question. I think I'm not taking the easy way out, but I might reverse that question back to you. Only because it's one of the biggest issues of ethics is that we cannot agree on a definition. And one of the most important things is to realize that, for example, there's no such thing as universal ethics. That does not exist. Ethics can differ from within a home to another home, with your family, the country, the street. It's on so many levels. And I guess I still think that I hope that you can find your own definition, that where ethics can, like, how can you minimize the effects, the negative effects of your designs and have it be as close to ethical, to what you believe ethical is, as possible. So if you find a definition, please do share it with me.
I think Michelle's going to answer that question.
Okay, so maybe I'm going to take the example of Lebanon. Cases that I find, and it's my personal view on it, very unethical. For example, when an artisan works for hours and for days to produce your piece and gets not underpaid, like nothing, almost nothing for his or her work, and is not mentioned when you exhibit your work, I think this is unethical. When, for example, you use resources that you import, knowing that they are very finite, and you create an object that is unique, and you sell it to unbelievable price, I think this is unethical. When you're not exposing, when you're not being transparent about the source of the material you're extracting, from where it's coming, who worked on it, what were the risks that the stakeholder took to make this material arrive here. So the lack of transparency about the process, I think this is unethical. So but this is my personal view, but I think there are laws, international laws, human rights laws that are involved in this. So yes, maybe on a big definition, the ethics are hard to define, but there's a minimum that I think can be defined. For example, I don't like to say this because I know the artisans who work with this material, they're really working hard on it. But for example, rattan for me is a controversial material, because when you know how it's being extracted from South America or Asia, and how the workers, they put their life at risk to get this material, maybe we should ask ourselves this question: why are we still using it, right? And I know, for example, we have local material. We have an asab in Lebanon, and I know it's less sustainable in time because it attracts insects, etc. But instead of putting research to develop this material and understand how we can use it, we're using this money to import rattan. So yeah, I think there is a minimum definition that you can have. I think maybe I'm wrong, but
I think I agree with you, and I think that accountability is a big part of ethics. Who takes responsibility for the artisans, for the materials that are imported? And one thing about laws is that it's very easy to put a law in place, but what about to uphold the law? Who upholds the law? And so when you find your definition of ethics, or when you want to work on a definition of ethics, I think there's a lot of mini aspects, let's say, that branch out, and one of them is accountability. Maybe defining each part can lead you to a greater definition of ethics. But yes, accountability, responsibility, that's a big part.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. I do totally agree on the fact that design is an act of politics, definitely. Always, even when you design a glass, and no issue with that. What happened in Italy, most of all, but I guess almost around Europe, is that in the 70s, the design was radical, and the idea of making an ethical act towards society was really strong, with different results, but doesn't matter. Then something happens, and there was a kind of ego explosions of designers. So you get like a kind of superstar. And I believe that in that point something got disrupted between society and design. What do you think about the need of, or the desire of fame of an individual as a designer towards and political action towards society through your design? I don't know, I've never understood the balance between those two stuff.
Is this one of the gods that needs to be killed, maybe?
Could be. So in Italy there is a huge amount of that.
Let's maybe try not to kill gods. Thank you for that question. A lot of things come to mind. That first, maybe that I feel, or I was told by one of the great designers, that chasing fame as a designer will get you nowhere. That's not how it works. At the same time, Dr. Amos Bianchi yesterday was talking about having one foot in the circle of society and one foot out. And these radical designers in Italy, they created a beautiful movement. They followed what was happening in society, and that's one of the reasons for their success. So it's a difficult balance, but at the same time, like, fame is never the answer, or fame can never be the goal. I don't want to say can never. I'm not telling you what to do. Just maybe things will be easier for you when you have a different vision of maybe a better word could be like even revolution. Revolution, maybe the result of that is fame, not necessarily, but maybe just changing the wording even can create some space for finding a balance for that. I hope that answers your question. Yes.
On the same topic of ethic, I think ethic is it's not what's ethic, it's how is it ethical. In this day and age, everything at some point has its bad and good views. And let's look at the ridiculous. For example, the Louvre heist. This has created so much controversy. Why? Because it is an act of defiance, and it shows the ridiculous of the dominant power. For example, they don't have cameras outside. So in saying, it shows how much we can be defiant against them, how much they can be ridiculous in their fame. And this can be looked as an ethical act. It is a designer's act. For example, it can be looked as a theater. When we look at the scene, it's very ridiculous to a point. If I see this, if I didn't know it was a political dilemma, I would think it was in a movie. You know what I mean? So I think that ethic became a point of view and not a genuine definition, as you said. So I agree with that.
Thank you for that. I think, like, this absurdity and the radicalism of design can be, like, for example, also like when there was a movement of throwing paint on these thousands and thousands of paintings, thousands of dollars worth of paintings, like, did they achieve their goal of publicity? Yes. Was it ethical? I don't know. Debatable, because they were fighting for a cause. And so absurdity is a big part of this. And I completely agree with you. I think it's important to note that, yeah, what's maybe how is better than is another way of asking the question instead of what is.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dana. It was really very eye-opening question. We're going to pass to the round table. Give us 5 minutes just to set it up, and we'll begin.